Lunchroom. Informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI. Food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It is midweek, Wednesday, March the 2024. And this is program number 1153 of the Lunchroom. I'm your host, Alex George Jr. Now, in addition to radio, and of course the frequency is 101.1 FM, you can also get us at our website. It is rcistlucia.com. You can download our previous shows on that platform and podcast form as well. And you can get us live. We are streaming on Facebook. Just search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. And please be sure to like and share that as well with your friends and family. If you'd like to call in just a bit to tell us what's on your plate today, the number to do so, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. As well as our WhatsApp number, it is 724 0008. Again, 724-0008. You can message in or call in to that WhatsApp number. Some birthday greetings today going out to Mrs. Melissa Francois Doxery. Happy birthday to you, Melissa. And we do hope that you're having a wonderful birthday celebration. Hope you're enjoying it to the fullest. Also sending birthday greetings out to Miss Charlene Bodley. Happy birthday to you. And we do hope that you're having a fantastic birthday celebration, Charlene. And it's also the birthday of a movie director. You know a lot of his movies, like Django, I think, for instance, one of them. Quentin Tarantino. He turned 61 today. As well as singer Mariah Carey. She's actually 55 today. Now, a bit of history for today. In the year 1513, the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon had along his first expedition got sight of Florida for the first time. In the year 1625, Charles I, King of England, Scotland and Ireland, ascended to the throne. 1871 on this day, the first international rugby union match was played, in which Scotland defeated England 1-0 at Rayburn Place in Edinburgh. 1914 on this day, so the first successful non-direct blood transfusion, and that was performed by Dr. Albert Hustin in Brussels. 1958 on this day, Nikita Khrushchev became the Soviet premier as well as the first secretary of the Communist Party in Russia and the Soviet Union. And in 1977 on this day, the world witnessed its worst ever aviation disaster, in which 583 people died when two Boeing 747s collided. And that happened at Tenerife Airport in Spain. We now move on to our dish of the day. The daily dish is brought in the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Jugosile, and Slack Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our program here today at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. And of course, yesterday, the much expected laying of the estimates of revenue and expenditure took place yesterday afternoon. And that was done by Minister of Finance, as well as Economic Development and the Youth Economy, as well as the Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre. And he outlined, in the first instance, some of the successes from a financial perspective of the government of St. Lucia in the year past. And one of them, of course, had been the matter of achieving surpluses on the on some various targets which are normally set. In fact, the indication was that there was a primary surplus of $104 million on the government accounts, which was about $42 million more than last year and $62 million above what was originally expected or projected when the budget was in fact brought forward. So effectively, the expectation was that there would have been a $42 million primary surplus, and the government was able to, in fact, achieve a better surplus of $104 million. Now, these surpluses give you a sense of, in the case of the primary surplus, how much money is left over, so to speak, which the government can then put towards things like your capital projects. So that's generally why you do want to be able to achieve a surplus, either a primary surplus or, of course, what is known as sometimes as well, very different, but a current account surplus or current surplus. And in one instance, the amount that you pay towards interest is included, and the other one is not. So that's why you're seeing some of those differences there. And the current surplus was $456 million, and a recurrent account surplus of about $46 million. That achieved a primary balance of 1.5% of GDP as compared to 1%, which was recorded in 2022-2023. Now, I believe, what I recall, international agencies like the IMF, they will say that you need to be actually hitting a primary surplus in the region of 3% of GDP. And the reason for that is that that would then give you sufficient space to be able to make investments. And so after you've paid all your operating costs, your recurrent costs, there should be something left there so that the government can invest. The government can make investments. And that's really important if we are to talk about growth, economic growth and development. So the government has to be able to find that effective surplus to put towards the construction of schools, to put towards the construction of hospitals and healthcare facilities, to support transfers in some instances when there are needs for subsidies, or to also have space to deal with shocks. So that, road construction, lots of those areas require some level of surplus. So at the end of it all, of course, government needs to be spending less on a daily basis than it's bringing in, so that it can therefore make those kind of investments. Now, of course, invariably, it also needs to go out and borrow. And of course, we've been seeing over the years that having to take place. And the question is at the rate at which it can take place. So once you do that, of course, you are running a deficit. And most governments around the world are running some form of fiscal deficit. The question is that deficit manageable? Is it within some sort of prudential limit within which you can, in fact, eventually pay back your debts, your various loans, and of course other instruments such as treasury bills and bonds. And so that is, of course, very, very important in terms of overall government expenses. So just again to give you a sense of what was achieved in the year 2022-2023 by way of tax revenue. Last year, that was $1.13 billion, and the projected outturn, in other words, at the end of this week, government would have expected to bring in terms of tax revenue, $1.25 billion. So clearly, that projection there that they will be bringing in more tax revenue. It's still slightly lower than the approved estimates of $1.26 billion, which was expected come from raising of taxes. Now, of course, that partly would probably be because of the late implementation of the health and security levy. You would recall that it was delayed in being brought on. And this current financial year, the hope is to increase that by up to 1.33 billion EC dollars. So that's the hope in terms of tax revenue. And of course, on the non-tax revenue side as well, last year there was a hope of bringing in 153 million EC dollars. And of course, non-tax revenue includes things like the CIP transfers, a very important source of government revenue there. The actual outturn was less than what was actually anticipated. It was about 123 million, but of course more than by about $4 million more than what was actually collected in 2023. In this current financial year, the less optimism, the hope to bring in 147 million EC dollars from non-tax revenue. The government also hopes to raise money through grants. In 2022-2023, the actual amount collected from grants was 76 million. And last year, that went down a little bit to 73 million. So government actually collected about $3 million less in terms of grants over the past financial year. And that, of course, may have to do sometimes with the rate at which these grants are disbursed, but also sometimes in terms of implementation bottlenecks on some very important projects that you will find that sometimes those projects don't get going in the time frame that was expected. This current financial year, government is hoping to raise $108 million. This upcoming financial year, $108 million by way of grants. And if you add the $3 million that they hope to raise by capital revenue will generally refer to government selling property that is like, for instance, land, crown lands and what have you. They expect to raise about $3 million from that in this current financial year. That tends to be not very high, the capital revenue. The total expected revenue and grants will be in the region of $1.576 billion. Now, of course, you did hear that the government is, in fact, looking to spend $1.89 billion in this upcoming financial year. And that difference is where we have to then speak about borrowing. And that's where there is a financing requirement. That's where government must then go out to seek borrowing, either from banks, or it could be from external sources like the Caribbean Development Bank, like the World Bank. Of course, those two major players tend to be where we get a lot of financing from, but as well on the regional government securities market, where it will float treasury bills and bonds. One of the points that had been raised by the Prime Minister in his address yesterday was that the rollover of government instruments remains pretty healthy, with over 90% of those instruments, in fact, being rolled over. So people are not cashing out asking for their money back and going on their way. The vast majority of those are still being held, and so that's useful from the government perspective, because they're not paying out a very large sum, or they did not have to pay out a very large sum last year. Of course, because of the requirements, however, in terms of financing and the way those systems work, the government still has to provide or have that money set aside in the event that all the bondholders and treasury bill holders decide all at once, or whenever that it's due, that they've got to be able to pay off these individuals. So it does have implications in terms of tax. In terms of cash flow, when these treasury bills and bonds mature. But thankfully, the vast majority of them tend to roll over. So in terms of expenditure in the upcoming financial year, wages and salaries is expected to be the largest component of government expenditure, in the region of about $482 million, followed by goods and services. That comes in at about a little over $302 million, or almost $302 million for goods and services. Transfers, and of course transfers are very broad. They can be anything from monies that the government is providing to the OECS and CARICOM. The Prime Minister made special mention of the commitments to the University of the West Indies, which the country has been owing for some time. We've been hearing the lament from the Minister for Health about large sums still being owed in Martinique for health services. In some instances, in addition to people having that private debt, sometimes the government itself will take on the cost of healthcare, and so they provide that service. So that would be a transfer. You would also, of course, see transfers towards providing things like public assistance, the need for things like the distress fund, and also support for state corporations. Not all the state corporations can sustain themselves, and so in very many instances, the government is in fact providing the funding for that. So you name it. Let's say the Cultural Development Foundation, they get a subvention on an annual basis. Many others will find themselves getting that. For example, the St. Lucia Archaeological and Historical Society. In the sporting sector, the government will provide subventions to various sporting organizations and sports clubs, to certain private education institutions. They also get transfers. The public health system now is under that, Millennium Heights Medical Complex as well as St. Jude Hospital. Because they are separate entities, they also get transfers. And so that $230 million represents a number of really extended government services that are provided through a whole host of various state actors. It could be National Conservation Authority, for instance, that deals with management of beaches and maintaining parks and that sort of thing. The St. Lucia National Trust is another example of that too. They're getting a subvention. A whole host of things, both internationally as well as regionally and at the local level, benefiting from those transfers. So in addition to that, you then have interest payments on debt. And that has gone up to, it's expected to be in the vicinity of $232 million. Now, just to put that into context, in 2022-23, That amount for on interest was in the region of $173 million. By the end of March 31st this year, government would have, for the past year, expected to have spent $215 million. So you can see an increase of almost $45 million in how much government has been putting out on an annual basis on interest charges. So you're seeing that impact of borrowing coming and becoming very, very stark. And that trend is continuing, although at a slightly slower pace for this coming financial year. That $215 million last year is looking at this year at $232 million. So we're talking again another $17 million that the government has to find to be able to meet those interest charges. And so that, of course, is a matter of clear concern when we talk about the issue of borrowing and the long-term implications down the road. And you're seeing some of that right about now. Of course, government gives back some of that because in places where they still owe people after tax, that whole tax system is worked out, and the refunds for the past year we'll expect it to be about $13 million. Next year, expect to spend about $10 million in refunds. And principal repayments, which is also debt, paying down on the principal, is looking at somewhere around $93 million in the upcoming financial year. Now, by way of project expenditure and what has been done in terms of the financial accounting systems, which is now being utilized in government. Before there was a lumping together of a lot of capital under the capital head, capital expenditure. But quite often, many of these projects were not actually capital. And so, for instance, you would see under the capital expenditure head, you would see something like, okay, for an example, the performance delivery management unit. You may recall that in the former administration there was an arrangement with this group called Pemandu out of Malaysia, and they brought in consultants to work on certain projects, and so within that context, these funds were actually not going really and truly in terms of capital, true capital, which would be investment in infrastructure, buildings, plant, equipment, right, land, right. That the real capital. There were a lot of things going towards purchasing of, things that were wages and also services and what have you. So it's now being broken down so that you get a much better, a clearer sense of what government is managing through its projects. And then you can disaggregate that project sum to see what is the true capital and what is being spent for other things like the same classifications of goods and services, wages, and what have you. And so in the case of this coming financial year, government project spending is in the region of $465 million. And of that amount, $465 million, $280 million of that is what would be considered capital spending. Right? The balance is largely going towards the purchase of goods and services, in particular, $120 million or so going towards the procurement of goods and services under those projects. And so that may be, for example, you may have a project to support farmers and providing them with certain services, maybe drainage services, or you may want to provide them with inputs for production. That would be falling under that category. We did hear recently the Minister for Agriculture also mentioning the recommencement of the employment support system. That was something that started a couple of years back under the NICE program, providing employment support for farmers, because that's one of the really difficult inputs that a lot of those in the agriculture sector are facing, where you've got the average age of a farmer being over 60, a lot of difficulty in the wages, getting persons who are strong, able-bodied individuals to come on and to assist on those farms. It has been challenging, and so he did mention the provision of that kind of support. So that would come under a project probably, and it would be classed as wages and services. So this is how it is in fact now being broken down, so that we can get a pretty good idea of how those projects are in fact, what the money is going towards for a lot of those actual projects. Now, where's the money coming from in terms of financing from external sources? Well, there is going to be a fair bit coming from the Republic of China, Taiwan, in the amount of $44 million this coming financial year. The Caribbean Development Bank is supposed to provide somewhere in the region of about $6 million. The European Development Fund, another $5 million. UNICEF is supporting in the amount of $2.1 million. The Japanese government, $5.3 million. The United Kingdom, through its Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund, that's the ongoing works along the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road, which is in current throes. That's $27 million. The Saudi government, they are providing in the amount of $5 million by way of I believe this is grant. The United Nations Environmental Program is UNEP, $7.6 million, and a fair bit of that is probably through some of their JEF funding. The Pan American Development Organization, $1 million. Other players in the mix, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office from the United Kingdom, $2 million. Loans largely coming out of the largest one being the World Bank and their development policy credit of $81 million. That was just recently approved by the Parliament of St. Lucia just last week. But as well, continued borrowing from the CDB, $33.3 million. The European Investment Bank, $5.2 million. The Canadian Clean Energy Fund, $2.5 million. More from CDB through the Inter-American Development Bank, and $6.9 million. Another World Bank again. This one is $62 million, and as well some continued loan financing from the Republic of China, Taiwan, in the amount of $6 million. The government of Saudi Arabia, as you recall, also is providing some loan financing for St. Jude Hospital. That is in the amount of $30.4 million to be spent this upcoming financial year, as well as $10 million from the Africa Export-Import Bank. Well, we could be looking at this for a lot more for a very long time to come, and we'll continue to do a little bit of the review, but that's our dish of the day. We've got to take in our weather report at this time.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. If all kind of tiles, come down to Tiles Plus. We also black gas and vanity. Box, doors, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses, Jugos, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Island Style's annual Easter clearance sale is here, and boy, do we have some exciting deals for you. Massive savings on tires to be had with discounts of up to 30% off store-wide. Buy all we have in the low stock model and watch your discounts skyrocket with a huge 50% off. Plus, get chip edge tires for as low as $1. Yes, we're clearing out our old stock to bring in the new. And that's not all. The Easter Bunny has added extra savings on toilet, tubs, bathroom vanities, tile tools, and so much more. It won't get any better than this. Jump on these excellent deals and visit our Island Style showroom in Cash Street, Rodney Bay, or Viewfort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. That's 8453. Sale ends holiday Saturday. When you think tile, think Island Style.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And that's all, of course, on the 1.1. It's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talamba. The forecast for St. Lucia valid for the next 24 hours. Winds will be light and variable. The weather partly cloudy to cloudy skies with a few light and moderate showers. The forecast for the Lesser Antilles, partly cloudy to cloudy skies with scattered light and moderate showers over the Leeward Islands and northern Windward Islands. For the south, fair to partly cloudy skies with a few brief showers. And the weather summary, light and variable winds are expected across the Eastern Caribbean region during the next couple of days. A low-level trough will continue to cause some cloudiness with scattered showers over the northern portion of the Lesser Antilles during the next 24 hours. Relatively dry and stable conditions will persist over the southern half of the region during the forecast period. And this was your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talamba.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island Style's annual Easter clearance sale is here, and boy, do we have some exciting deals for you. Massive savings on tires to be had with discounts of up to 30% off store-wide. Buy all we have in the low stock model and watch your discounts skyrocket with a huge 50% off. Plus, get chip edge tires for as low as $1. Yes, we're clearing out our old stock to bring in the new. And that's not all. The Easter Bunny has added extra savings on toilet, tubs, bathroom vanities, tile tools, and so much more. It won't get any better than this. Jump on these excellent deals and visit our Island Style showroom in Cash Street, Rodney Bay, or Viewfort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. That's 8453. Sale ends holiday Saturday. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Of course, we've got about 20 minutes to go before the hour of 2 o'clock. And if you want to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, the number to do so, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. You can also message into our WhatsApp, and that is 724-0008. Again, 724-0008, and you can, of course, send in your messages and comments into the chat on Facebook as well. And, of course, we're just giving some shout-outs to Solange James, as well as Wilma Amede, Mary Frederick, and everybody else, Martha James, everybody else who was in the Facebook chat. Good afternoon, and welcome to the lunchroom.
Good afternoon, Mr. George.
How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad.
Wonderful.
But the money that the Prime Minister is mentioning there, that is a lot of money. That is borrowed money, isn't it?
Well, we did try to give a breakdown of how much is actually borrowed.
Well, we go in the 1 billion, isn't it?
Right, so 1.8 billion, 1.89 billion is the projection as to what is to be spent in the coming financial year. The truth about it is that the government tends never to actually spend all the money that it says that it's going to actually spend, and perhaps that's a good thing sometimes. But yes, out of out of that, the hope is to raise somewhere in the region of $308 million from external borrowing, as well as the external borrowing, $244 million, and the bonds and treasury bills, $64 million. So the leaning is really more on external borrowing, as mentioned. New sources like the Saudis, like the World Bank, like the Caribbean Development Bank, they in fact are representing the bulk of the borrowing that is going to be engaged.
Yeah, but as you said, the people on bonds, if everybody think the same and they say we will go for the bonds, we're not going for rollover.
Well, people
that
are rolling over.
Government in jeopardy, isn't it?
People are rolling over, so it is good that we can see that there is an appetite for keeping those bonds, the existing bonds, and the plan then as well is to raise another $64 million from new bonds and treasury bills, which is, in comparison to maybe years gone by, it's perhaps about where not so bad. But the majority
in St. Kitts and Nevis and Dominica. With CIP, they bring in a lot more CIP money than why we can bring CIP money in St. Lucia. What we bring is very little.
Well, yes, we have not gotten to that point we as yet. They certainly
So what are we waiting for then?
Well, we were late in the game, caller. That's number one. Right? Just like we were late in the game to get into the financial services sector. When we compare our financial services sector to that of the Cayman Islands or the BVI or Barbados, we were small fry. Same with the case of CIP. We got into the business of CIP pretty late. So the Dominicans and the Kittitians in particular have had quite a lot of an advantage in terms of market presence, and they've been able to raise a lot more. But of course, even in that context, caller, we were seeing some changes happening in the CIP. The requirement now is that an agreement across the Caribbean to go a minimum amount per passport of, I think, $200,000 is supposed to be instituted. So it may mean that you may be seeing some changes coming on the horizon in terms of the volumes of the amounts of revenue that are coming in. But yes, it's a very important source of revenue for St. Kitts. But they themselves have to be very careful with it in the long term.
The Minister for Leisure, Ile, I heard he said something about the CIP money.
Well, I think the government is seeing how it can better utilize the CIP funds for government-led projects. So, although it has not yet been enunciated, I guess we'll hear about that in the budget in April, the budget statement.
Yeah.
But as to exactly what that is going to look like, but because we've seen how in the case of Dominica, for instance, they've used that quite a bit in terms of developing housing projects. So we'll have to get a sense as to how that works out.
Yeah, that's the reason why I mentioned St. Kitts and Nevis and Dominica, because I know they're doing well. They do show you a lot of the things, capital management and lot of things.
But the important
with that money,
yes,
and we in our case is very, very little. We had that mentioned.
So the IMF, because we actually just shared the Article 4 consultation report a couple of weeks back. The International Monetary Fund, if they were to have their way, well, no surprise, they would like to see more of that CIP money going towards actually paying down on debt. And from their perspective, the country would be better off if it was carrying less debt. Now, it makes some sense, but it's not so attractive for perhaps countries that are looking for investment. They're looking for government-led investment. They're looking for projects, and that's where there is that tendency to want to have more of that going on. So it's interesting because
there is money to borrow and very cheap money, because to me, what deal we get with the Saudis on St. Jude, that is very cheap money.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing about a lot of the external borrowing, thankfully, is at concessionary rates. So although it still has to be repaid, but at least the interest rates are not so steep. So from the CDB and the World Bank, the risk then is when you have to go to commercial banks and pay commercial bank rates, right, to fund some of these projects. That's where you have to be talking about to be very careful, because you're talking about 6%, 7%, 8% rates. So. And of course, the same with respect to the treasury bills and the bonds. You're talking generally within that region. So
anyway, Mr.
All right.
Judge,
thanks for that.
Have a good afternoon.
Have a good one.
Want to
of course.
Something.
Thanks very much for that engagement, caller, and have yourself a good one. So yes, certainly the matter of the borrowing has to be watched very, very closely. As I mentioned, the interest payments, as we have witnessed, have moved from 170 million in the neighborhood of 170 million, and this coming financial year they are in the neighborhood of $230 million. Right, so that's $70 million in increase in interest payments in a matter of two financial periods. So it definitely is something that we need to be wary of and to be very, very careful of. Another one that I know is also very, very topical is the matter of rentals. And I think this financial year, again, the government is looking at about nearly over $77 million in rentals, in property rentals. So that is another area where, and I think in fact it was mentioned by the Prime Minister, the Orange Grove Plaza coming on board now. So the government is having to pay those additional rental fees for some of these other properties. So quite a lot was shared by the Prime Minister yesterday. And the debate, in fact, is continuing today in the Parliament. And we will, of course, be hearing different representatives giving and ministers sharing and giving sense as to what is being done in their respective ministries. Of course, the Prime Minister mentioning quite a bit regarding infrastructure. That was the area where he wanted to give a lot of attention. He also gave quite a lot of attention regarding the use of the health and security levy, and making the point, essentially, that the amount that this HSL is actually collecting perhaps does not represent more than 10% of what is actually being spent in terms of health and security. So effectively, that levy was just to kind of top up what was already being spent on health and security, and pointing out that there's a need to get money to invest in those sectors and to improve on the quality of service, and so therefore there has to be some additional collection by way of government dedicated towards health and security. And this is nothing too surprising. We would have expected that this was if we were going to be talking about universal health care, at some point there has to be that conversation about how that universal health care can be financed. The whole idea is that if we can all pull together and contribute, then there will be certain services that we could then potentially be able to afford as a whole, instead of the fairly fragmented approach that we have right now, which is everybody has to go and try to get their own health insurance. We, of course, know some entities have group health insurance coverage, but effectively a national health insurance coverage as a means of being able to support universal health care has been touted for quite some time. So the need, of course, for the government to be able to provide that support directly as well from by raising revenue for that purpose was part of the discussion that the Prime Minister went at length to kind of give that context as to how much money has in fact been spent in the area of healthcare, in particular the investments that were pointed out, work with St. Jude Hospital, which is supposed to be kicking into high gear this coming financial year, once the tenders have been approved, contracts have been approved, and as well, of course, other areas like the Castries Urban Polyclinic, previously the Victoria Hospital, and other areas like the Soufrière Hospital requiring renovation and rehabilitation. So many of those areas were pointed out, and of course the investments that are happening in the area of national security was also raised. The police headquarters, divisional police headquarters for the north of the island, as well as ongoing works with custody suites and other police stations around the island. As well, of course, the promise of a new halls of justice. So all of those, of course, having to find the fiscal space to be able to achieve that requires, being able to raise that revenue. And of course, the question is, how do you raise it in an equitable manner, as equitable as possible? So certainly in the upcoming financial year, a significant amount of money being provided to the Department of Infrastructure, as one would expect. Their budget this coming year somewhere in the region of $85 million. And of course, this is also against the backdrop, no doubt, of the potential of pressure when it comes to wages and salaries, because government would be going into a new period for negotiating wages and salaries for the public sector. So many of these things, no doubt, would be looked at within the context of this upcoming financial year as the debate goes on at the House of Assembly. I just saw, in fact, just a short while ago, an interesting image. I'm not too sure of the context of it as yet, with the leader of the opposition seeming to be at the back in the tray of a pickup, in fully dolled out in his three-piece suit. I'm not too sure what exactly what he was doing there or whatnot, but I'm sure we'll get to hear more about that later on. But as we continue to speak about this whole matter of the budget, one of the areas that we have not so much control over has been that of the currency, our monetary policy. And it is a matter within the context of the Eastern Caribbean. We perhaps have gone the furthest in terms of unifying, having a unified currency union, and ensuring a fairly stable space, financial space, as a result of maintaining this currency union. We have in fact been pegged against the US dollar for a number of years now, as opposed to other countries in the region, particularly when you look at Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica, they have had floating dollars and have not fared so well. So, in fact, as a result of that stability, we've seen quite a bit of inflow of money, of capital, persons in many of these other jurisdictions wishing to, in fact, hold treasury bills and hold bonds, hold instruments, and make investments in the Eastern Caribbean because of that security that has come from having that stable currency. So it has certainly fared pretty well for us. But I'm not sure that we shared it, but there was an interesting comment or opinion coming from the former head of the central bank over in Barbados, Mr. Delisle Worrell, and he opined that it's time to dollarize CARICOM, the Caribbean community. And that was, in fact, a story shared by, I think, the Jamaica Gleaner and Observer sometime back a couple months ago this year. But I thought it would be useful to just share that to give a very interesting context as to what exactly he was actually recommending, given the context that we've seen the successes of at least pegging our currency in the Eastern Caribbean to the dollar. But what he's in fact recommending is going even further than that. And one can say just simply doing away with our local currencies altogether. And some countries have gone that route, and we've seen different results. In the case of Ecuador, for instance, not so long ago, they dollarized their economy. Argentina tried it, but that didn't actually work out too well in their favor. And from what I'm understanding from listening to one economist, you can dollarize your economy, but you need to ensure that you've got sufficient dollars coming in. And that is a really important factor in this assessment. Otherwise, you could find yourself in some very difficult waters as well. So let's take just a quick read of this article for the end of the program. The former governor of the Central Bank of Barbados, Delisle Worrell, has said CARICOM countries should formally adopt the US dollar for everyday transactions, a process called dollarization, to do away with their local currencies, arguing that the greenback is already the common currency in the region. Worrell made the call in an interview with the Jamaica Observer recently, saying the move should be embraced instead of using 9 different currencies in CARICOM: the Bahamian dollar, the Barbados dollar, the Belizean dollar, the Eastern Caribbean dollar, the Guyanese dollar, the Haitian gourde, the Jamaican dollar, the Trinidad and Tobago dollar, and the Surinamese dollar, none of which, he argues, has any value outside their borders. I believe that we should get rid of all the local currencies and use the dollar, the US dollar, Worrell told Caribbean Business Report as he responded to queries about whether regional trade and integration are impeded by multiple currencies in CARICOM. It doesn't take anything off of us. In fact, we are harming ourselves by having domestic currencies, because to protect the value of the domestic currency, we all have to keep huge amounts of foreign reserves. Those foreign reserves are not available to us to do investments locally. We have to keep them in the U.S., basically as a loan to the U.S. government, because we have most of them as treasury bills with the United States, he pointed out. Jamaica, for example, has foreign reserves amounting to U.S. $4.7 billion, with U.S. $1.57 billion of that amount held as foreign security assets, chiefly U.S. Treasury bills. Worrell said he was convinced that adopting the U.S. dollar as the official currency in CARICOM, the regional trading bloc made up of 15 countries, was the way to go after seeing failures over the years of Caribbean governments to work together on certain issues such as a common currency, which would, amongst other things, make trade easier in the region. Currently, CARICOM countries trade in U.S. dollars amongst each other, with the Barbados dollar, for example, having little value in Jamaica and vice versa, Worrell stated. He added that in the Caribbean, even if a Jamaican wants to go to Carnival in Trinidad, there is no market for him to acquire Trinidad and Tobago dollars in Jamaica, saying that person would have to acquire US dollars for use in Trinidad and Tobago. We have to accept the reality, and the reality is that the US dollar is the common currency. And I would go so far now as to say, having had the experience over many decades of failure to have a common currency amongst us ourselves, we have to accept the reality that the US dollar is the common currency. He pointed out that countries in the Caribbean, like his own, Barbados, which has pegged the value of its currency to the US dollar at a rate of 2 Barbados dollars to 1 US dollar, has to find substantial foreign reserves to maintain it, using resources that could be deployed otherwise to help develop the country. And he swatted away arguments that if the US dollar is adopted by CARICOM as the official currency, each currency would lose control over their own monetary policy. The truth of the matter is, none of our countries have an independent monetary policy because everything we produce or consume has an import element. And the only thing we can do is to make sure we don't aggravate the import price by devaluing our currency. And that's why I am saying we have a high price to protect the currency, because the scarce US dollars that we have, we take a big chunk of it and we lend it back to the US just to protect the value of our currency. Panama doesn't have to do that, he continued. Panama adopted the US dollar as its official currency in 1904. Ecuador dollarized in September 2000, and El Salvador followed suit in January 2001. Recently elected Argentinian President Javier Milei has pledged to dollarize his country's economy and abolish its central bank. By eliminating their national currencies and replacing them with the US dollar, countries considering dollarization hope to achieve economic stability and growth. He said if CARICOM moves to adopt the US dollar as the official currency, each country's central bank could use a portion of the foreign reserves that are held at the Federal Reserve to redeem all local currency holdings, then deposit US dollar to equivalent value in people's bank accounts. He said if the countries dollarize, then they would be required to hold a smaller balance than is now held as foreign reserves, as with the US, to facilitate normal transactions. And that piece coming from the Jamaica Observer of January 19, 2024, entitled Dollarize CARICOM. That's all the time we have today here at the Lunchroom, but of course we're back again tomorrow for our final program of the week, of course. It's a Holy Thursday tomorrow, so we do hope that you can join us for that. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.